This is United Lodge of Theosophies, Washington, D.C. We meet at every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. and you can join us. Our Gmail address is ultdclodge@gmail.org, or you can find us at www.ultdc.org. Our meetings on Sundays are on Google Meet. The Declaration. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is a dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophies, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophies in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophies all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophies belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from Light of Asia. Lo, the dawn sprang with Buddha's victory. Lo, in the east flamed the first fires of beauteous day, poured forth through fleeting falls of night's black drapery. High in the widening blue, the herald star faded the paler silver as there shot brighter and brighter bars of rosy gleam across the gray. Far off the shadowy hills saw the great sun, before the world was aware, and donned their crowns of crimson, flower by flower, felt the warm breath of morn, and began unfold their tender leaves. Over the sprangled grass swept the swift footsteps of the lovely light, turning the tears of night to joyous gems, decking the earth with radiance, broidering the sinking storm clouds with a golden fringe, gilding the feathers of the palms which waved glad salutation, darting beams of gold into the glades, touching with magic wand the stream to rippled ruby, in the break finding the mild eyes of the antelopes and saying it is day, in nested sleep, touching the small heads under many a wing and whispering, children, praise the light of day. Whereat there piped anthems of all the birds, the quail's fluted song, the bulbul's heel, the morning of the painted thrush, the twitter of the sunbird, the starting forth to find the honey ere the bees be out, the grey crow's caw, the parrot's a scream, the strokes of the green hammersmith, the mina's chirp, the never-finished love-talk of the doves, yea, and so holy was the influence of that night dawn which came with victory, that far and near, in homes of men there spread an unknown peace. The slayer hid his knife, the robber laid his blunder back, the shroff counted full tale of coins. All evil heart grew gentle, kind heart gentler, as the balm of that divinest daybreak lightened earth. Kings at fierce war called truce. The sick men leaped laughing from beds of pain. The dying smiled as though they knew that happy morn was sprang from fountains farther than the outmost east. And over the heart of said Yasodhara, sitting forlorn at Prince Sidara's bed, came sudden bliss, as if love should not fail, nor such vast sorrow miss the end in joy. So glad the world was, though it wist not why, that over desolate wastes went swooning songs of mirth, the voice of bodiless prats and boots. For sing boot and divas in the air cried, "It is finished, finished!" And the priests who stood with the wondering people in the streets, watching those golden splendors floods the sky, and saying, "There hath happened some mighty thing." Also in wren and jungle grew that day friendship amongst the creatures. The spotted deer browsed fearless where the tigress fed her cubs, and cheetahs lapped the pool beside the bucks. Under the eagle's rock, the brown hares scoured, while his fierce beak but preened an idle wing. The snake sunned all his jewels in the beam, with deadly fangs in sheath. The shrike let pass the nestling finch, the emerald halcyons played beneath, nor hawked the merbs, though the butterflies, crimson and blue and amber, flitted thick around his perch. The spirit of our Lord laid potent upon man and bird and beast. Even while he mused under the Bodhi tree, glorified with the conquest gained for all, enlightened by a light greater than days. And now today's talk, Symbolic Christmas.
Thank you. Welcome, friends. Tomorrow, December 21, marks this year's Winter Solstice. With the sun having completed its path southward and seeming to stand still as it turns and starts its path northward. Here in the winter solstice, the days are the shortest and darkness is more upon the face of the earth than ever. The ancients thought of December 21 as the birth of the sun. As the sun gods went down under the earth to help the souls, the seeds and plants imprisoned there. Remaining for 3 days, they came forth triumphant in all their glory on December 25. So December 25 is a special celebration for all under the sun. The very ancient peoples, the Indians, the Egyptians, Persians, Greeks, Americans, while thinking of the sun as a life giver to all growing things, knew it to be only a symbol of the true sun, the one light, the self. They knew that the self acts only through beings, and that this great sun of our world was just an instrument or lens for the true unseen sun. When they sang their hymns to the sun in this cycle, it was with the thought of acting for the self in every heart as they sang, that which giveth sustenance to the universe and to ourselves, from which all doth proceed, and unto which all must return, that thou art. In the golden vase of thine earthly body may the pure light of the spiritual sun shine forth, that thou mayst know the truth and do thy whole duty in the journey back to the sacred seat. So, behind the sun, as behind every person or other body, there is spirit, life, and intelligence. With the return of the sun comes a spiritual, a mental, a moral growth and uplifting. Ideas taken hold of and carried into expression during this time have tenfold the power they would have at another time. As time went by, people came to think of all the forces and beings in the sun as making up one being, which they worshipped as the sun god. Much the same today, perhaps, that they think of God as a great being outside themselves, rather than as a real self within each and every being. The eternal verities tell us that it seems very fitting that an elder brother, who was born into the world to be a teacher of the three truths called fundamentals in Theosophy, should have his birthday at the birth time of the new sun cycle. Was that what the Catholic fathers thought when deciding when Jesus was born 400 years prior to the time that they were trying to figure out when he was born? No one really knew when Jesus did come by that time. Only very wise men know that because they know cycles. It takes the sun 25,868 years to travel through the 12 signs of the zodiac. So that means that it must take about 2,155 years for the sun to move from one sign to another. It seems as if the world learns and forgets during these cycles, so that humanity needs to be reminded once again of what it has forgotten. The sun turned into the constellation of Pisces in 255 BC. And this means that a wise one must have come somewhere around the year reckoned as the birth of Jesus. A messenger like Jesus is recognized only by a few at first. Jesus never wrote anything, and those who knew him did not write of him till long after he had died. So all we have are a few legends about him. And we can only know he was a great teacher by wise sayings attributed to him. It was very close to 1900 when the sun passed into the sign of Aquarius. When H.P. Blavatsky, as messenger of the masters, reintroduced to the world the three truths she called Theosophy. This wisdom religion synthesizes for the world philosophy, religion, and science. Now, some 150 years after its introduction, many still are not acquainted with this science of the soul. Wise men knew about cycles and were expecting the birth of Jesus, so they came to greet the babe with gifts of gold as symbols of the sun, and frankincense and myrrh, because these had mysterious healing qualities to protect him, symbols of love and thoughtfulness, as all gifts should be. They knew that the glory of Jesus would never come from riches and lands, but from knowing and showing the treasures of the soul. And as they looked for the birthplace, they followed a star which led them to where he lay, that star called the Star of Bethlehem. All nature seemed to know that the cycle of the messenger had arrived. Legend tells us that the clouds were astonished, the fowls of the air stopped in the midst of their flight, oxen fell to their knees, and the shepherds sang hymns of rejoicing. At Christmas time, we also do not forget December 25th is the hidden birth time of all nature. Without the turning of the sun on its cycle then, there would be no glorious bursting forth at Easter time of all the living things on earth. HBB recorded that every country has had its saviors. He who dissipates the darkness of ignorance by the help of the torch of science, thus discovering to us the truth, deserves that title as a mark of our gratitude, quite as much as he who saves us from death by healing our bodies. Such an one awakens in our benumbed souls the faculty of distinguishing the true from the false. By kindling a divine flame, has a right to our grateful worship, for he has become our Creator. Whether the Savior in whom we believe has for an earthly name Krishna, Buddha, or Jesus, we have but to remember one thing: symbols of divine truths were not invented for the amusement of the ignorant. They are the alpha and omega of philosophical thought. Theosophy leads the way to truth, but the light thrown by the torch of truth can be discerned only by the eye of the awakened soul, by our spiritual senses. It blinds the eye of the materialist as the sun blinds that of the owl. Ancient observations of this time of the year were twofold. What we might refer to today as esoteric and exoteric. Buddha used this twofold approach, as did Plato. HPB sharpened tools we can use to continue with this approach, but many, even theosophists, do not really get this fact. The esoteric approach involves initiation into the mysteries of those who are ready. The exoteric is for others. We have carried on the traditions of the ancients, but we have lost the meaning of the traditions. In our age, the religion of the people has become increasingly materialistic and disfigured, invariably due to ignorance, greed, and the ascendancy of selfish personalities seeking position and control. Humanity has ever been plagued by this problem throughout the ages, despite the efforts and warnings of those who know. During the early centuries, Christmas was often celebrated in the months of April and May. In the 4th century, Pope Julius I made the 25th day of December the Christ Mass. HPB called it an unfortunate choice. Near the time of this choice, the mystery schools came to an end with the brutal murder of the brilliant philosopher and mathematician Hypatia, followed by the burning of Alexandria's Neoplatonist school. There were other books burnings, and there was also the infamous Council of the Bishops of Constantinople. By then, the Gnostics, like St. Paul, who founded Christianity, had taken a back seat to the Orthodox section, which kept the people in ignorance as it enforced profession of faith in a carnalized and anthropomorphized Christ. The ancient message of the Gnostics, upon which Christianity and other modern religions are based, was the same as the message of Theosophy presented to the world by HPB. This message has the first key that one has to use in order to unravel the secrets involved in the mystic name of Christ. I am in the hearts of all men, says Krishna, speaking as the Logos in the Bhagavad Gita. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? Asked St. Paul. In the Gospel according to Luke, we may learn that the worthy were those who had been initiated into the mysteries of the Gnosis, and who are accounted worthy to attain the resurrection from the dead into this life. The greater depths of whatever religion. And the words apply to all those who, without being initiates, strive and succeed through personal efforts to live their life and to attain the naturally ensuing spiritual illumination in blending their personality, the Son, with their individual divine spirit, the God within themselves. The more one studies the ancient religious text, the more one finds that the groundwork of the New Testament is the same as the groundwork of the Vedas, of the Egyptian theology, and the Messianian allegories. In any age, but particularly in times of rapid transition, the human face of past, present, and future contend with one another, locked in mortal conflict by the illusion of difference. The struggle is violent, for every old allegiance knows that its survival depends upon the body and not the spirit of human beliefs. Chief among these delusions of our age is the Jesus image. Be ye perfect, he taught, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. He came to spread the tidings of salvation through self-knowledge. Yet with the passing of only 2 millenniums, some have affirmed in his name that knowledge is unattainable and that all hope lies in blind belief. He came not to deny the law, but to fulfill it. Yet some of his priests turned his mission into a unique event which made belief in the law impossible. He came to demonstrate the Christ in all, yet so misunderstood was his example, and so misdirected were the efforts of his interpreters, that few have been able to identify themselves with the Christ ideal. The West must focus more on the divinity within each person and understand that the Christ story goes beyond the life of one divine being. If the West were to do this, the meaning of the life of Jesus, his sufferings and sacrifice would at last become clear. The death which the future has in store for the Jesus image is no death at all, but a transfiguration. From son of the Father, he must become a brother of man, and thus a reality in human experience. No teacher has suffered a fate more awful than Jesus did in penalties exacted by those he came to help. This fate will continue until man has come to realize that the purpose of the coming of the great adepts like Jesus is to show us by example that we have the power within us to become like them. H.P. points out that, quote, Christ, the true esoteric Savior, is no man, but the divine principle in every human being. He who strives to resurrect the Spirit crucified in him by his own terrestrial passions and buried deep in the sepulchre of his sinful flesh, he who has the strength to roll back the stone of matter from the door of his own inner sanctuary, he has the risen Christ in him, whether heathen or Christian by birth. Theosophists refuse to materialize and degrade that which is the purest and grandest image, the symbol of symbols, namely the immortal divine spirit in man, whether it be called Horus, Krishna, Buddha, or Christ. The primitive writers of what we now know as the Gospels knew the truth and the whole truth, but some of their successors had as certainly only dogma and form, which lead to hierarchical power. This Christos principle doesn't just blossom in us, it takes lifetimes of self-induced and self-devised methods to bring out this principle. Regarding the Christos principle, pages 58 and 66 of the Ocean of Theosophy state, and when we either wholly or now and then become consciously united with Buddhi, the spiritual soul, we behold God, as it were. This is what the ancients all desired to see, but what the moderns do not believe in. The latter preferring rather to throw away their own right to be great in nature and to worship an imaginary God made up solely of their own fancies and not very different from weak human nature. Although reincarnation is the law of nature, the complete trinity of Atma, Buddhi, Manas, we frequently talk of the sevenfold nature of man, that's the higher nature, does not yet fully incarnate in the race. Yet man is not yet fully conscious, and reincarnations are needed to complete the incarnation of the whole trinity of the body. Then the race will have become as gods, and the entire mass of matter will be perfected and raised up for the next step. This is the real meaning of the word made flesh. It was so grand a thing as in the case of such persons as Jesus and Buddha, as to be looked upon as a divine incarnation. And out of this too comes the idea of the crucifixion. For Manas is thus crucified for the purpose of raising up the thief to paradise. Christmas is actually a season of birth and of growth. It is the season of the rebirth of the spiritual nature. The celebration of the birth of Jesus was made to correspond with the old knowledge of the ancient observances. We seem to carry on with the observances, but we have lost the knowledge we had. We do not apply to ourselves the fact of the recurrence of the real Christmas time, the season not only of the physical renewal of the earth and all beings, but also return of the inner life and of impulse of a spiritual kind. As Easter is a celebration of the ascension of spirit out of matter, Christmas is a time when spirit has fully descended into matter and is ripe to spread throughout matter. Christmas is thus a time of rebirth. The life of earth is young, and the inner life has its rejuvenance in its growth. From the cosmic level and the whole of life, we find that day and night, summer and winter, life and death are the seasons of nature. But the perceiver, the experiencer of these seasons is the self-conscious man, who lives when the body dies, who is awake when the body rests at night, and who is continually observant when the body is awake or asleep. The man is conscious every moment. He sees recurrent ways of activity, then rest, and so forth. And the return of his thoughts and his feelings reinforced and strengthened on the second coming, are reinduced and weakened according to the degree of energy he has given them. Always there is a continual return of impressions. It is the course of every being to follow the law of action and reaction, to proceed throughout the coming back of which was before plus whatever has been incurred in the meantime. There is an eternity of the progress which is not restricted to any particular form and which is within the means and reach of every individual. So even if we are so inclined, we cannot work for ourselves alone, nor progress by ourselves alone. But taking advantage of all recurrent waves and seasons of uplift, we may go on from one plane to another, from state to state, from quality of being to quality of being. A spiritual idea in the heart or in the mind is the beginning of the rising tide for an individual. In the time of the rising tide, we must acquire the power of concentrated effort, which will hold us through the receding tide and give us a better standing when the tide again rises. This is the time of the year when the tide is at its highest. The more the self-conscious man has gone into matter, the more he has closed his spiritual doors, because his self-consciousness and energy have been put into worldly things. But he must go through and emerge from these stages, bringing with him all the knowledge he has gained while immersed in matter. And not only is his effort to gain knowledge for himself, but also to impart his feeling and understanding to the kingdoms below him in the manner which he uses. Then when he moves up the scale of being, that matter too will be lifted up and become more fitting for his use. A tide comes for the appearance of beings greater than we are. Greater because at some time they took advantage of the rising tide to go far beyond where the ordinary man found himself able to go. These beings come at certain great seasons, as the heavens tell the story in the messianic cycle. There has arrived once more the season to rise with. We can follow the path of the great saviors. As was said of Jesus, in all things become like unto us, that they may impart to us something of their great knowledge and point us to the path they followed. Jesus challenged us to be one of them someday by saying that we can do greater things than he did. John chapter 14, verse 12. and referring to us as gods in John chapter 10, verse 34. What greater gift can we be given at Christmas or at any time than to be shown the path for bringing out what we already have within us, to be as they are and to serve as they serve. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you.